That's the great task we need to come to today, because we have never had so much death. We have never been faced with this enormous juggernaut of taking innocent human life before birth, and now the threat of taking it in old age for what Hitler called useless eaters, not so very long ago. As someone said, if there's one thing we learn from history, is that we learn nothing from history. And we have a perfect example of that today. Hitler was the first one to engage in legal euthanasia. And we were appalled. We were appalled by the Holocaust, by the taking of 6 million Jewish lives. And now we're doing the same thing, or much worse. For example, Montgomery County, who founded Pharmacists for Life and who tracks the numbers of abortion, estimates that in 1 year now, counting abortions from pill, IUD, Depo-Provera, morning after pill, and so on, and counting surgical abortions, there are between 9 and 12 million abortions in the United States. That, I suggest to you, is a unique situation, never having had this kind of situation before in history. And what I say about the United States is true of Europe, which is dying out, literally. The birth rate in Europe is so low that in most countries there are more coffins than cradles, as the blunt Germans say. And of course, the lowest birth rate in the Western world is in Italy, where the average family is 1.2 children. The Spanish have 1.3 children. Would you believe it that famous demographers like Chonu estimates that the Germans, having had a birth rate for so long, have no future? And of course, the very lowest birth rate is in Russia proper, where the average family now has 1.1 child. I should explain that you need 2.2 children per family to have what we call a reproductive birth rate. Let me explain that briefly. You see, the mother has to replace herself. She has to replace her husband. But 15% of women have no children, whatever all the reasons. And so every woman has to have 2/10 more than the two to replace herself and her husband, to replace those children that those 15% should have or would have. And at that point, what we mean by reproductive replacement birth rate, as many come in by birth as leave by death. That's a reproductive replacement birth rate. Now you see, in this country, the average couple has about 2 children. In Canada, the average couple has 1.8 children. And strangely, the lowest birth rate in North America is in Catholic Quebec, where they have 1.5 children. And incidentally, that's the number of children overall average in Europe, 1.5 children in the whole of Europe, averaging it out. So we have a demographic problem. You see, in the West, we are dying out. And what do the countries do, the Western countries, wealthy countries, who bring contraception, sterilization, and abortion, and sex education, etc., to the poor countries of the world, the developing countries of the world? They import people. For example, in this country, last year, by official government statistics, we brought in 860,000 people. Now, you can be sure another 200-300 came in illegally. So in the last years, we have imported every year about 1 million people, so that the USA, like all Western countries, is fast changing. For example, in 25 years, the Catholic Church in this country will be 40% Spanish-speaking. And that is true, of course, of Europe, where there's an enormous influx in this growing vacuum, all caused by contraception, sterilization, and abortion. As Benjamin Franklin once said, a remedy for luxury has never been found. And now we know what he meant. Now we can see it, those of us who have our eyes open. And I think it is terribly important, as a sociologist, which is my training, by the way, it's terribly important to know the kind of world we're living in. As Leo XIII said, we must look at the world as it really exists, and then we must look to God for the solution to its problems. May I suggest many people, if not most people, don't know the kind of world they're living in.